Politics panelist Tim Wilson, Liberal MP, and Anne Aly, Labor MP. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Anna.
Thanks for having us.
I enjoyed the giggles during the baboon read.
Oh, go the baboons. I'm on their side.
There was a very funny tweet by Michael O'Brien, the opposition leader, saying, "Why are we missing out on this in Victoria? Dan Andrews, step up."
I don't even know what to say to that. Well, if we turn to topics of the week, now we've had this major speech from Mike Burgess on the state of terror in Australia. In particular, he singled out right-wing extremism. Anne Aly, do you think it was time it was called out?
Absolutely, it was time. I mean, we've seen just in the past couple of weeks, we've seen in the US, the threat of right-wing terrorism has been upgraded, and in New Jersey, they actually upgraded and came out and said that it was greater than the threat of ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Just last week, we saw a terrorist attack in Germany on a shisha bar, and I think there were 9 deaths by a right-wing extremist. And let's not forget that it's coming up to the first anniversary of the Christchurch attacks as well. For some time now, experts in the field, practitioners in the field, as well as communities have been calling for our law enforcement agencies and our intelligence agencies to take the threat of right-wing extremism, violent right-wing extremism, more seriously. So this is certainly a welcome, very welcome announcement by Mike Burgess.
What did you make of Mike Burgess's comments?
Well, it's hard to disagree in principle with what Anne just said, but I would argue that there actually has been quite a noticeable acknowledgement by intelligence agencies, but this statement on Monday was very significant. No one should pretend otherwise. The government's invested a lot of money in things like support infrastructure for security for those who are potential victims, but you just need to go to the Executive Council of Juries reports on the rise of anti-Semitism in Australia. I've met with LGBTI groups that have experienced the same issues from these extremists, and so it shows you that the threats we face are constantly evolving. We can't ignore some to address others. We have the issues around Islamist extremism, and we have to confront these ones too.
Do you think the government should be doing more to call out right-wing extremism?
Well, I think wherever there's extremism, we should call it out. It doesn't matter whether it's right-wing, whether it's Islamist extremism, and I think that's why the government's invested, particularly post-Christchurch, significant funds into helping local mosques and Islamic schools, and the same is also true with Jewish schools, because part of the full spectrum of activity we need to do to protect people, but also to make sure there's the proper focus.
And you agree with the label right-wing extremism?
Well, I mean, people call it whatever they want to call it. There are lots of different terms. People can say it's right-wing extremism. I'm going to leave that to the experts. But what we see is extremism on a national sentiment. We see people motivated by politics, motivated by religion, and all of them are a serious threat to our social cohesion.
Would you like to see stronger language on right?
Absolutely, I would. I mean, we had members of the Liberal Party line up to say to Muslim communities, you need to call it Islamic extremism, you need to call it out. And they did. Now it's time for them to practice what they preached and stand up and call out right-wing extremism, because language does matter, Tim.
Absolutely,
and the terminology does matter, because it focuses on the motivation and the push and pull factors and the mobilisers of the form of violence. And it's really important that we do differentiate between different mobilisers for the forms of violence. And while trajectories to violence may take the same course, dependent and regardless of the form of violence and the form of extremism, the mobilisers and the ideological mobilisers are very different, and it is important that we call them out, and it is important that as leaders we take that challenge.
You agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why I went through it just before.
Okay, we'll move on then to coronavirus response. It looks like we're not going to get the budget back in the black, Tim.
I don't think we should jump to any conclusions. What we know is that there are serious global headwinds that Australia is now confronting. We're not immune and we're not isolated. We don't know completely where coronavirus is going, but there are very disturbing signs. The markets are obviously reacting, and this is going to present big challenges for all of us. But this actually reinforces why there has been such a clear and strong statement by the government about the need to be balanced and prudent around the budget, because these are the sorts of unpredictable events that can come along which can create challenges for balancing the books. So the more you're working in the good times to secure your budget position, the better you're in a position to be able to respond. And Australia's in a better respond on a health basis, on an economic basis, to respond to these the events of coronavirus than just about any other country in the world.
Well, I would argue that there is always the threat of global headwinds present, but the government has put all of its economic eggs into the budget surplus basket. And now it's not going to be able to deliver that basket. They've promised and promised and promised.
Well, you never even made the promise.
They're going to deliver that basket, and they're going to deliver that promise to the Australian. You went to the election with the promise that you're going to deliver that to the Australian people.
The simple absurdity.
It's my turn to talk, Tim.
I know, but you're being dishonest.
Tim,
you're being dishonest.
No, I'm not being dishonest.
You are being dishonest.
Did you not promise a budget surplus to the Australian people?
We absolutely did, and our objective is
back in black and develop back in black merchandise.
But the position we're in with the budget, enabling us to fund $2 million towards a vaccine, making sure we can roll out an emergency services support as is required, and putting Australia in the best possible position is because we have been working as strongly as humanly possible towards a budget surplus. The alternative that you took to the election, and we need to think about the very real consequences.
We're not talking about Labor's alternatives here. We're talking about your performance on delivering a surplus
you would deliver a weaker,
that you promised to the Australian people.
You would deliver
My turn to talk, Tim. I let you talk.
No, you're talking over me.
My turn to talk, Tim.
You are leaving a weaker Australia to confront the challenges of coronavirus. And this is the problem. Weaker borders, weaker budget position, weaker health system because we wouldn't be able to fund the essential services. That is the consequence, and that's why we have taken such strong, prudent measures and ones you have opposed every step of the way.
Okay, you have been talking over Anne.
Let's talk about you for a change, okay? Let's stop talking about Labor for a minute because, newsflash, we didn't win the election. You all did, and you won the election because you said you was going to deliver a budget surplus. Now, Labor has been calling on this government to take some reasonable measures to ensure that the economy is propped up in the event of any of these global headwinds. Things like propping up New Start, things like bringing forward business investment, bringing forward infrastructure investment.
Massive new taxes.
And at least having a wages policy that doesn't consist of keeping wages low as the centrepiece of your economic policy.
And massive new taxes.
We have been calling on you to undertake fiscal policy to prop up the economy, and you have ignored that and continued to say back in black and deliver. We're going to deliver this budget surplus. Now you're not going to deliver it. So you need to explain it to the Australian people.
This is just completely dishonest language. The idea that
did I coin back in black, or did you all say that? How many times has Josh Frydenberg said back in black? The suggestion that we would just go out and blow the budget and that would put us in a stronger position to confront uncertain times like those that are presented. As the Prime Minister said yesterday, 12 months ago, nobody thought there was going to be a coronavirus. There is. The question now is, did we put ourselves in a position best able to confront this by having the money for medical support, money for the emergency services, money for vaccines, and making sure that we have secure borders? And that's what this government has delivered. Now, we don't know the answer to the question about the budget and the surplus yet. Of course, we will continue to work towards it. But we have to make sure at every point we're taking the prudent and responsible measures. And everything you just outlined there was to say, don't worry about it, don't worry about the future. Let's weaken Australia. Go again, putting them words in my mouth.
Well, you did. Weaken Australia to be confronting this exact situation.
What I said. What I've said is that you all went to an election, did you not? Saying that you were going to have a budget surplus. Did you not? Yes or no?
We went to the last election making it crystal clear that was exactly what we were working towards.
So you put all your economic credibility eggs into that basket.
And we said it for the forthcoming year.
So
we were crystal clear about that. But when it comes down to it, the positions that you've just articulated that you wanted to take to the election, $387 billion worth of taxes, and on top of what you've done since... No.
But you're in power.
Exactly, and we've made sure that we're in a strong position to be able to secure our borders, deliver essential services as this events take on, and to make sure that the budget is in as healthy a position as possible to make sure that we confront these global headwinds front on. And everything you've argued is to do the opposite.
So you're not going to deliver the surplus.
Well, these are the sorts of things the Treasurer is looking at right now, but the situation, the globally unprecedented and the globally unprecedented situation that we face at the moment means that we have to reassess and reevaluate exactly what the budget position is. And everything you have outlined, every single bit of everything you outlined would weaken Australia in our position to confront it. So to sit here and take a moral posturing view...
I'm not taking any moral posturing.
Without any understanding of the
consequences.
We're going to hit on one topic that I think we can all agree on before we wrap this up. Domestic violence response, the awful incident in Brisbane this week.
Yes.
What did you make of the speeches in Parliament from the Prime Minister Opposition Leader on Hannah Clark?
Well, I mean, I think that everybody was moved in the Parliament over those speeches, and I think if you look at it, everybody was sitting there in silence, and I suspect there were even some tears shed. And I think it was important, going back to where we started from, which is to call out behaviour as has been done in the parliament by both sides of politics, but it's a backdrop of the government investing significant money and resources into issues around domestic violence and family violence, because we take this issue very seriously.
We're almost out of time. Anne Aly, how did you feel about this week's response?
I think I've made it very clear how I feel about the response. I think we need to also move beyond words. Words are lovely, but we need to move beyond words and we need to have serious action. And it's great to call out violence when you see it, but a lot of the time it's hidden. They don't hit you in the face. They hit you where you can't, where your bruises won't show. And I just want to send out a message to all the women out there. If you are experiencing violence or abuse in your relationship, I see you, I hear you, I've been there, and I know what you're going through.
Excellent note to end on. Anne Aly and Tim Wilson, thank you for your time.